It's February 19th, 2025. The SS United States is guided from her former berth at Pier 82 into the Delaware River by tugboats. The 990-foot vessel is on her way to Alabama, where she'll be converted into an artificial reef and sunk off the coast of Florida. The vessel was once known as America's flagship and still holds the speed record for a North Atlantic liner of her size. She's a reminder of a different era in American history, one of triumph and limitless potential. So why has she been rotting in Philadelphia for 30 years? People online seem shocked to see her being relocated to Florida to be sunk, but she's been laid up awaiting renovation for longer than she was in service. How did this symbol of the nation's pride end up here, and is there a chance she could be saved? Let's look at the history of this ship and the plans to save her from over the years. The SS United States was the brainchild of this man, William Francis Gibbs. Gibbs, an attorney, had an eye for naval architecture. In the 1910s, him and his brother Frederick Herbert Gibbs would practice designing fictional plans for a 1,000-foot ocean liner. William and Frederick became obsessed with this idea, so much so that in 1915 Gibbs left his law firm to focus on naval architecture full-time. Many of the most famous American ships of the 1920s were designed by the Gibbs brothers' firm. The SS Malolo gained headlines in 1924 when it was rammed during her sea trials and remained afloat due to her impressive design and safety technology. The SS America was a noted veteran of the Second World War, having helped transport over 350,000 troops to and from the front lines. In fact, it was the America's service, as well as the service of British ships such as the Queen Mary and Queen Elizabeth, that showed the United States government that ocean liners were useful for far more than merchant purposes. Large ocean liners could be used to mobilize entire military units to the front line in a matter of days. In 1945, the U.S. Maritime Commission put out a request for designs of a new superliner, one that could be used to show the United States naval superiority in peacetime and move troops and supplies around during wartime. With a career of maritime wins under his belt and a proven track record for troop ships, William Francis Gibbs was granted the contract to design the new ship. Finally, he was able to bring his 1,000-foot ocean liner to life. The only caveat was that due to the dimensions of the Panama Canal, this ship had to be capped at 990 feet. The Big U, as she was affectionately known, was sleek and modern. She was fast, too. The ship's 4 turbines each generated 60,000 shaft horsepower connected to an 18-foot propeller. One of her propellers can still be seen on the aft deck of the ship. The top speed of the ship was a military secret and is still debated, many claiming the ship could reach 43 knots. Her hull was made of steel, but her superstructure was made of aluminum. Not just her bulkheads, but her funnels and even her railings were all made from aluminum. She was the largest construction of aluminum in history, a record unbroken until the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center in the 1970s. The lightweight material kept the center of gravity for the vessel low and prevented her from being top-heavy and rolling. This is also the reason why after 30 years of no upkeep, the funnels are still in excellent condition and haven't rusted through. When the Queen Mary was taken to Long Beach to be turned into a hotel, her funnels were so thin they were basically just held together by the many layers of paint on them. They all had to be replaced with newer funnels. On the United States, her funnels are still as good as the day that they were built. The ship sailed for 17 successful years and was loved by the public. Ocean liners had been declining in popularity with the introduction of the jet airliner. The United States was fast, but it could never beat a 6-hour transatlantic flight time. In 1969, the same year as the Apollo moon landing, the ship was withdrawn from service and laid up in Virginia. Her nearly pristine mid-century modern interiors were sealed inside the ship. Norwegian Cruise Line tried to buy it to turn it into a cruise ship, but the Navy refused to sell it due to the classified nature of the propulsion systems. Annoyingly, the ship would be declassified 1 year later, thus thwarting even the earliest attempt to save the ship. The ship was passed around from a few owners and potential developers until 1984, when her fittings were removed and sold off. Most of the ship's interiors were musty from having sat for over a decade. The final nail in the coffin for her interiors would be in 1992, when she was towed to Ukraine to undergo asbestos removal. This process saw her interior stripped down to the bulkheads, a state which she remains in to this day. Her lifeboats and their davits were also removed and sold off. In 1996, she was towed to Pier 82 in Philadelphia while plans were made for her future. And there she sat, for 29 years. In 2011, the SS United States Conservancy purchased the ship for $3 million. They had a grand plan to save her. A non-profit organization, the Conservancy's plan was to raise public awareness and financial resources for the preservation of the ship. Their leader was probably the best person for the job. Susan Gibbs, granddaughter of her architect, William Francis Gibbs. She leaned into the role as the face of the Conservancy, constantly appearing in interviews and at fundraising events. She truly fought to keep this ship afloat. The Conservancy had various plans over the years to turn the ship into some sort of mixed-use space. They had a lot of different plans based on who the developer was. Basically, because the ship had a blank slate and an empty interior, it could have turned into anything. The ship had various engineering and architecture firms study it, and the project frankly made financial sense. In cities all over the United States, formerly run-down industrial districts are seeing a revitalization and newfound appreciation from developers. In 2026, the United States of America will be celebrating its semi-quincentennial, otherwise known as its 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. It would make sense for the federal government or the Navy to step in and preserve this image of America's might, right? The ship was in the right place at the right time. So what happened? The ship would need her entire interior to be redesigned and refurbished. This is an expensive process when it's done to a 2-story townhouse in the middle of the city. A 990-foot superliner would make this a very large price tag. The ship's mooring fees in Philadelphia alone were $60,000, and that's before the owners hiked the rent. It was estimated that $1 billion would be needed to return the United States to service. For perspective, the Utopia of the Seas cost $1.3 billion to build, and most companies would rather have a new build in these circumstances. The United States location at Pier 82 was an issue as well. Major work couldn't be done because she was at a working cargo pier. The ship was covered in lead-based paint, which is a big issue that could have only been addressed if the ship had been towed to a dry dock. Groups came and went with plans. Norwegian Cruise Line tried to buy her twice, once in the 70s and then again in the 2000s. Crystal Cruise Lines tried to buy her. RXR Realty was a development firm which tried to buy her, but they all hit roadblocks. They all found it to be too cost prohibitive. Here's why we see the ship being sunk today. Pier 82, where the ship is located, is owned by Penn Warehousing, which in 2021 increased the ship's rent from $850 to $1,700 per day, requesting $160,000 in back rent, and terminated the contract with the Conservancy. This is an issue for a nonprofit. The Conservancy responded by stating the rent hike violated an agreement made in 2011 when they originally made their pier agreement, and you can guess this all ended up with them suing each other in court. The ship was ordered to vacate the pier on June 14, 2024. The Conservancy scrambled for another donation drive, but ultimately decided on a backdoor plan for the ship. She would be sold to Okaloosa County, Florida, and turned into an artificial reef. Ships are sunken as artificial reefs all the time, but it's rare that you see one the size of the United States. The ship is going to be sunk shallow enough so that people of any sort of skill level will be able to dive and see her, which is actually pretty cool. The Conservancy was basically faced with the choice to scrap the ship or sink her and turn her into an artificial reef, and they consider this to be the more dignified path, and I'm inclined to agree with them. While this is not the outcome we originally envisioned, the ship will have a future. This next chapter of the SS United States story will bring tens of thousands of people annually from around the world to experience her. There are so many wonderful museum ships in the United States already. The Queen Mary, the Milwaukee Clipper, the USS Little Rock. This is an experience that is unique to the SS United States, one that you can't do with many other transatlantic liners, except for maybe the Britannic. So she's being towed away from Philly to be brought down to Alabama, where she'll be stripped of her lead paint, her funnels and masts will be removed, and she'll be brought out to Destin, Florida, to be sunk in a ceremony. A land-based hotel will be built. It'll be a great destination for people to come, learn about the ship, and do a fun activity. People have fought for decades to save this ship. Remember her old running mate, the SS America? As she was being towed to the scrapyard, the ship's tow line snapped, and she ran aground off the Canary Islands. The ship arguably met a far more undignified end. It was meant for the scrapyard, but it ended up being taken by the elements, slowly but surely. The United States is going to be celebrated. She's going to be visited by thousands. At the end of the day, the Conservancy was successful. She will not be unceremoniously scrapped. She will be preserved. Her story is not just about the life she had on the sea. It's also about the people who tried to save her, and how they ultimately succeeded in their mission.